guys, this is Ashley with Marshflower Studio. If you have watched some of my videos on how to crochet, thanks for jumping over and checking this one out as well. In these videos, I'm going to be showing you some different things you can do for a creative journal or art journal, just to kind of help center your mind in such a busy world that we live in today. So in this first video, I'm going to show you a few things that I used to teach my students about art journals. And it's just kind of an overview of some different things that you can do with these. So each video, I'm going to go through a different one of my art journals. Some of them have themes, some of them don't. But I'll show you some of the different techniques that I used to create some of my favorite pages, to give you some ideas on some things you can do. And it's all super simple techniques and tricks and things that you can do. You don't have to be able to draw. You don't have to be super creative to do these. And it's completely just somewhere for you to get some of the things out of your head, so you can kind of approach things a little easier to get your tasks done. So a couple of the things I'm going to show you first. A lot of the books that I have used in the past are done on just your typical black sketchbook. Most of the ones that I have done, I have created some kind of creative cover for them. This one you can tell is obviously painted. The rest of it is still black. This is actually one of the Blick sketchbooks. You can have something on the front page if you'd like. On the inside, you can do just your typical page. Or as you'll see in most of my books, I actually use both pages. I like that because it just gives me a little bit more space to work, spread some things out, have some more ideas kind of written down, painted out, glued in, and not all of them completely block out the whole page. Some of them are just a picture, some of them are kind of done in the hopes that I'm going to come back to it and add some things to it later. Especially if you're doing something like watercolor paint, it's going to need to dry a bit before you move on to any other steps. And then you have some pages that are just a complete everything everywhere, right? So as I said, I used to teach art and craft and photography. So some of my students have contributed some things to some of my art journals over the years. They have challenged me to do some different things that I never would have thought of doing. And in a lot of my books, there are little pieces of things that they gave me that they challenged me to include in some of the journal entries. And we'll go over some of these different techniques as I go. So there's some little notes from some of them, some things that they colored. This page was made completely by a couple of the girls that I taught. They actually did a couple different pages. And some things they made for me and just left on my desk, and I just had to stick them in here as a keepsake. So you don't always have to do anything extra. If you have a card from someone, a picture that a kid drew for you, you can put it in here and just leave it as is. Or you can write a little something about what it is, where it came from, something about that person. why you want to remember it, why you put it in there. So this is a cover idea. You can just simply paint right on top of the book. I recommend acrylic paints for this. Watercolors are not going to show up. And initially, this was painted completely white before the colors went over the top, so that those colors would be nice and vibrant. Because if you've tried to paint over black before, you probably noticed that it's kind of dull and dim until you get like lots and lots and lots of layers built up. So this was painted white to begin with, and then the colors added over top of that. So a couple other books that I'm going to show you today. This one was one of my favorites. The buttons were hot glued to the cover of this book. In hindsight, as much as I carry these around and take them different places, show them to different people, some of the buttons have popped off over the years. You can glue them back, but I would recommend using a firmer glue if you want to do something like this to the cover of your book. I had tons and tons and tons of buttons laying around, so I used my pretty buttons to cover this book. Oh, I even have a couple buttons that I put on the back. Boop. All right, another option you have. This is one that I did, and I just loved the colors in this yarn. I am a fabric artist, a fiber artist. I do lots of crochet and things with yarn. So I took and I just glued, and this is with regular Elmer's school glue, glued this string in place in this kind of cool design for the cover of this one. We have another book where I have painted the black cover white, and then I used Sharpie pens to kind of draw this design onto the front. And this is a good place to stop and talk about the binding of your book. Most of the books that I use have a more traditional book binding where they're sewn or glued in. That's something that's a personal preference. This book I haven't used as much because of the spiral binding. As I've said before, I like to use both pages when I'm working on my art journal, and with that spiral running down the middle, it's kind of harder to just continue an image all the way across. And with a lot of books like this, you'll find that they have perforated pages. And I'll tell you from experience, when that perforation gets wet, a lot of times these pages will fall out. So keep that in mind. If that's not something that bothers you at all, then by all means, using the spiral books is still great, especially if you just want to do the front sides of the page, and you can kind of fold and tuck that other part underneath so that you don't have to worry about all that extra space to lay your book out. For our next book, these are awesome. They are a little bit more expensive, but you can buy these lovely leather, books to start your art journal in. I haven't started this one just yet, but this gives you much more of a natural feel if that's something that you like or are interested in. And a lot of them are a little bit smaller. So think about how much space you want to work with. You can do a smaller book. You can do a larger book. Most of the books that I use are your typical 8.5 by 11 size pages. You can do the larger sketchbooks, you can do smaller ones. So tuck this back in here. So leather books are an option. One of the other books that I have started using recently is actually a lined journal. And you can absolutely use books that have lined pages in them. I typically don't, because I feel like this is a little confining for me. And I find that I do use the line spacing. And with my books that don't have lines in them, I feel it's a little bit more free to kind of create and do more different kinds of things than if I have the lines on those pages. And with this book especially, you can see some of the ink has bled through. So that's something to keep in mind with the book that you choose. If I had really thought about it before I kept going in this book, then I would have glued this page to the other one so that you couldn't see that kind of marker and pen showing through. You know, hindsight. And I can always come back and glue a picture of something else over the back of this page to kind of hide that if I don't like it. But you can do simple drawings, simple designs, things like that. Some of the other books I'm going to show you. This beautiful book, I got at one of the bookstores. Mostly just because I loved the cover on it. It's a very artsy kind of cover, and the pretty colors really appeal to me. The inside right here in the cover is a beautifully done watercolor, and then it has the plain pages as well. So this is one I'm trying to figure out exactly what I want to do with it, what kind of theme I want to create before I start with this. Then we're going to move on to another one of my just bookstore sketchbooks. There was a point where I was really working a lot with layering different things, so having the layered design and then the layered peacock over the top was something that I found really interesting, and it's pretty. With this one, I was using it for notes for a little while, but it also has just some more nice kind of natural color paper in there to work with. Sometimes when you stare at just a bright white piece of paper, it seems really intimidating. So if you can find something that has a little bit of a tint to it, it's not super bright white, I feel like that's kind of the way to go versus just staring at that super white empty page. So this is another one of my books, and we're going to get into the insides of some of these in some of the later videos. But on this one, I actually kind of accidentally created this design one day when I was working with some watercolors in class, and I liked it so much that I ended up cutting it out and kind of just taping it to the back. So you can absolutely take things that you have cut out of magazines, cards, other things people have drawn for you, given you, and just tape them to the book. I have this book, which is a little bit more of a different story as far as the cover goes. This is actually a spiral book that is just your typical spiral sketchbook from the art store. And I took just some brown butcher paper and covered the cover with the strips, Mod Podged over the top of it. And then I created the little buttonholes and kind of sewed that to the front. And this cover wraps all the way around. It's gotten dirty over the years, of course. But it wraps all the way around, and it kind of keeps that spiral covered whenever I'm carrying it around anywhere. And then I've just got some of the different little things that I've done and worked with, experimented with over the years in here. So you can totally turn just any old sketchbook, even if it doesn't have a pretty cover to work with in the beginning, you can add to it, build on top of it, and kind of create anything you would like. So I'm going to keep going because I have quite a few more here. This is one, this was probably one of the first art journals that I did. And I just loved this picture, and I loved the message that it kind of sent. So I took this idea and then I used it throughout most of the pages that are in this book. This is a really fun one that we'll go through later on. The next one I have down here, it's another plain, this is a Canson sketchbook. Painted the cover. I used a regular plastic stencil, and what I did was I spray adhesived the stencil to the book, and then I just coated it and coated it and coated it in white paint. So this is just white acrylic paint. And then once I knew that the design was raised up enough to have that kind of texture to it, I pulled the stencil off, and eventually I had to come back with some Mod Podge, and I kind of went over the whole cover because it was getting really dirty. And it still didn't help keep all of the kind of extra stuff from showing up on some of this white. But it adds character, right? And I can always kind of come back and put another layer of some other color if I want to hide some of those little dingy spots. But oh, this is another one of the books that I really love. The way that it's made. This one came with this nice thick kind of cover on the outside. I drew this little design and the words for my cover. And then on the inside of this one, it has this awesome little pocket folder envelope. So if you have something you want to work with, but you're not quite sure what you want to do with it yet, you can stick it down in here and keep it from getting lost or falling out. So in this one, I did a little bit more simple kinds of things, but we'll look through some of those on another day. I have another book where I have taped some 4-leaf clovers that I found to the back, just to keep those handy in case I need them, right? This is another one of the brown books that I have. I loved finding this book, and one of the reasons I did love finding this book, let me see if I can find a good page here. The pages are brown. So all the pages in here are recycled paper. They're all this fantastic shade of brown, and it really kind of lets you not feel overwhelmed in the least bit about all this white paper that you have to cover. So I kind of used that brown coloring to my favor when I was making this. And you can still completely cover it with other stuff if you want that kind of look. So moving on, the last book I'm going to show you, and then I'm going to show you how I'm going to start my new book. This book was originally a kind of royal blue color, and I didn't think it was very pretty. So I painted it green after I found this beautiful magazine picture. I'm not even sure which magazine I found it in at this point. So I glued that to the front. I did Mod Podge over that image so that it wouldn't get torn up over time. And then over time, of course, the cover ripped away from the actual book. But I've got tons and tons and tons of ideas for things in here as well. So even if you find a book at a thrift store, at, you know, just your local wherever store, and you don't really like the color of it, but it has the pages you like, you can completely paint it and turn it into something else, okay? And it doesn't have to be anything super elaborate. I painted this green and put a magazine picture on the front, okay? So don't feel overwhelmed by this. The last thing I'm going to show in this video for today is my new book that I'm going to start working on with you guys. This one is just a gray cover. I'm going to find something that kind of really inspires me for the front of this book, but I haven't found that yet. So the very front, I have a box where I kind of keep some things that I find inspiring or beautiful, and I kind of toss them in there to use later on. So these were in there from some of my students, some things that they were playing around with one day, and they were just kind of like, nah, I don't want to use it. And they left it in the, if you need some inspiration, here, take this box. So these two pieces will get glued into the front here, along with my little sign. So this will be the Art Journal Club channel. And we believe in a world where everyone is inspired to live a creative life. We believe human beings are born to make things. We believe making connects us all in our families, in our communities, around the world, and throughout history. We believe that in the modern world, making matters more than ever. We believe tapping into our creativity shows us new possibilities. We believe in the freedom to make mistakes, to fail, to learn, to grow. We believe in the history of craft is the history of what makes us human. And we wonder, what will we make next? So thanks for joining me. Like and subscribe if you would like to come back and see some of the tips and tricks that I will be using to create my art journals. And thanks for today.